I think I've met most of you. I'm Elizabeth. I'm your host. And I wanted you all to come to be able to meet John and hear his platform, which I'm very excited about. The opportunity to continue to make Seaside a progressive beacon. So thank you, and I hope that you will all contribute to John's campaign and help him win this city council seat.
All right.
Thank you, John.
Thanks for the food.
Absolutely. So thank you very much, everybody, for being here tonight. I realize that we all have very busy lives, and not all of us can be so lucky as to drive for a few minutes or walk next door, and some of you have really made an effort to be here, and I really appreciate that. First, I'd like to say thank you to Elizabeth and Despina. Can we all give them a round of applause for this wonderful food and all the time and focus and prepared and presented. It's so delicious, and I feel bad that I can eat more of it. I'm running out of space. So thank you so much to both of you, and John as well. John was part of the team. Thank you, John. Appreciate your help. So Jessica had to leave. She went to my stepson's annual school performance. Otherwise, she would be here. He gets to be Forrest Gump today. So hopefully she'll take a little video and I can watch him recite the lines of a pretty good movie. So a little bit about me. I grew up in San Diego. My dad moved jobs from Coronado to Naval Postgraduate School. I grew up here from my 12th birthday on, and I went to PG High because I didn't get to pick where we lived, but what a pick, Seaside. I worked here as a firefighter in PG. I was a reserve firefighter. I was a 911 dispatcher. Went away to San Jose State. Studied abroad for a year, followed somebody down to San Luis Obispo, decided that wasn't going to work out, moved home. I've been a police officer and a deputy sheriff, and after not being very coordinated, which I can tell you firsthand does not help when you're in public safety, I no longer work for the sheriff's office, and I'm a substitute teacher, part-time, and also on the county's planning commission. And so that has really been an eye-opener, working on things from oil wells in South County all the way up to Airbnbs in Big Sur to cannabis shops in Prunedale and everything in between. So it's really been quite an experience to kind of make my bones and learn more about public policy and land use and zoning and all those sorts of things. So through that work, I've been able to come to appreciate some more boring stuff like reading general plans and master plans and really diving into these tomes of information with little nuances buried inside of them. For instance, Sand City is proposing a development south of the Costco, and they want to put up some hotels and a bunch of housing, and there was no mention at all of affordable housing in that plan. But in their general plan, if you look around page 200 or 300, there's some information about how the city has a policy of creating no less than 15% affordable housing with new developments. So I've been working with the Monterey Bay Economic Partnership to kind of bring some light to that, bring some attention to that, so that the city can revise their project, the scope of their project, and include the thing that they said they wanted to do in the first place. So some advocacy around local issues, some advocacy around housing and water and sustainable development and education and jobs. I think those things are lacking. As important as they are, advocacy and attention to them is lacking in a lot of places, a lot of times. Not to say all the time, not to say that there aren't people working on them now, but it takes a majority of a city council to push an issue one way or the other. And so if we are not realizing what we want out of our cities, we need to ensure that the people that we elect think the way that we think and vote the way we would want them to vote, so that the issues turn out the way that we hope they do. Which is why I'm running for city council. In the months that I have been going to forum meetings and going to Seaside Council meetings and on the Planning Commission, and now as a member of Seaside's Environmental Committee working on more sustainable uses of the limited resources we have in Seaside, I've had the opportunity to kind of, as I talked to somebody a little while ago about kind of see how the sausage is made here in Seaside, and to realize that the way that I expect the city to work is not necessarily what's happening. And I have not been able to meet anyone who wants to run for city council that will think like I think and wants to see the things that I want to see. So I decided that I was going to run, and I was going to bring everybody with me, because I want to see that change. And if no one's able to step up and do that for whatever reason, then I should do it, because I can complain or I can act. So I decided to act, and convinced Elizabeth to support me, and she convinced Despina, and Despina convinced John, and I convinced Paul Cole to take pictures, and so it's really been this sort of grassroots effort to get people excited, to get people engaged, to just let people know that I'm out here trying to do something. And you know, it's early days. It's before the primary, which doesn't even happen in Seaside. We don't have districts, so I need to talk to all 8,000 homes with all 12,000 voters and not a sliver of the city. But I feel like that's actually better, because without the primary, there's not a handful of folks jockeying for your attention just to sell you something so that in November you remember them. And without districts, I'm accountable for all 34,000 people that live in Seaside, not just a few in one chunk of the city. And that to me means more, because while 22,000 or so people won't vote in this upcoming election, not that they can't, they just aren't registered today, that doesn't mean that their voice and their vision of the future and their needs and their kids' needs and their parents' needs are not part of the conversation. Just because you can't or don't vote doesn't mean that you don't count. And if we're going to elect people who make our cities better, they need to reach out to and be accountable to people everywhere in the city, and not just those who cast a vote or write a check. So it's really been a humbling experience to talk with so many people, to be encouraged and supported, to have a few minutes to spend talking to people about things that they're interested in, things that concern them, what they want to see out of their elected officials. And it's really been just such a wonderful time that I've had in the last several months as this campaign has kind of gotten off the ground. And I look forward to many, many more months of serving my community. So thank you all for being here today. I can talk about some policy things if you want to be bored, but I really appreciate your support and your enthusiasm. Thank you. I'm available to answer some questions if you guys have some specific questions. Otherwise, I can just sort of, you know, meet with you individually and chat with you one-on-one, or however you guys want to do it. I'll leave that open and up to you.
Okay.
Well, I know, John, you were answering my question about the water issue here on the peninsula. And like I told you before, we're Elizabeth's neighbor. My name's Albert, and it's my wife Susan. And we just live right next door. And our water bill isn't crazy. You know, it's actually, our water bill's pretty good. And you were explaining to me about the municipal water zone. I wondered if you could elaborate.
You're not in Callahan, are you?
No.
No.
No,
Yeah.
we're not.
We pay the city of Seaside for our water,
Right.
and
Right.
the rates are really good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
rates
a
are
very small area,
Yep.
geographic area of the
Yep.
city that benefits this way. And it would be wonderful if the whole city was on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
John was telling me the boundaries. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say exactly that. The boundaries are about Kimball to San Pablo and about Noche Buena to General Jim Moore. And so for a very small portion of our city, relatively, there is a tremendous benefit to the city's residents, citizen or not. If you live in that zone, you pay the city of Seaside for your water, and not to Cal-Am. And Marina Coast Water District serves the former forward area, so where I used to live at the parks right next to CSUMB, where some people live in along Co Avenue. What's the place across the street from you, Paul? The name just went right on my... Sunbay, and the mobile homes across the street. Bayview, that whole stretch of the city is within the forward boundary. And so they pay to Marina Coast, which is considerably less. When I lived at the parks off of Giggling Road, my water bill was about $90 for 3 adults and 2 kids.
Are these both public water?
Marina Coast and Seaside Municipal are both public water agencies. And so George has left. Unfortunately, George Riley, who is our local water expert on everything having to do with every facet facet of water, he will tell you that CalAm realizes $14 million of profit above all of their recaptured expenditures, but $14 million clean and free of profit every year out of the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District, which is everywhere from Carmel Valley to PG to Seaside and everywhere in between. And so that $14 million a year, if you were to divide it evenly, would be about $1.5 million, $2 million for each chunk of the district. And could you imagine what we would do in Seaside every year with an extra $2 million? The money that we could spend on parks, the money we could spend on education, the money we could spend on our roads, the money we could spend on whatever we wanted is extracted every year from our community and lines some pockets of a hedge fund or a mutual fund corporation. How does that serve us? Why is that in our best interest? Where's the Public Utilities Commission to defend us as the ratepayers and protect us against the bald-faced greed of a company that has no roots in our area aside from the physical straws in the ground to extract water? So the upcoming ballot measure, I don't think they've assigned a letter to it yet. It was Measure O in 2014. I would encourage everybody to vote in favor of the feasibility study. I will vote in favor of it. I endorse Public Water Now because at a minimum, it does not hurt to understand whether or not it's a good idea. We're not saying everybody should go to municipal water right now, you have no choice, we demand you vote for this, because that's not how voting works in the first place. But really, it's a feasibility study. Do we want to look at the numbers to see if this is a good idea? Would it save us money to be municipal versus private? Until you have that data, it's not even reasonable to argue one way or the other, because how do you know? That's the whole point. So,
why isn't that data available?
CalAm commissioned a study. CalAm commissioned a study and hired a person who said that it would cost more to take over the water system. However, they say the same thing about Felton, and Felton, California has a very small municipal water system. It was run by CalAm. They bought it from CalAm, and even with the mortgage on top of their normal water bills to buy the infrastructure and all the hardware and the pickup trucks and all that stuff, their water bill is less than the year-over-year increases of where it would be today if CalAm still owned it. And it's only been 4 years since the takeover. And so CalAm is alleging that it will cost us more money. CalAm's alleging that it will cost us as ratepayers more money to buy them out. And it will be a fortune, don't get me wrong. It will cost a lot of money. They're a huge corporation. CalAm does a lot of business. And when you transact corporate business, they get to establish their value over a period of time because they will lose that profit over a period of time. It will be expensive, no two ways about it. But as I was talking earlier with somebody, when you rent, when you lease a car, you pay into something for value, but you never own that thing at the end. You will pay indefinitely. When you own something, eventually, when that loan is paid off, when you've satisfied the note, you now have such an astronomically larger valuation of that property or that asset. And whatever a court determines that CalAm's infrastructure and business is worth, that one day, with a proportional increase over time, will be the public's asset and not some private company's asset by which to continue to charge us more money. The other side of that coin is that because they're a private company, when they bond, when they take out a loan, they pay 8 or 9% interest, and then we pay a profit to them on that interest rate. If it's a public entity, they pay a public municipal loan borrower pays 4% interest. So the interest alone on whatever happens with our water is less than half of what it would be with a private company. So if CalAm does build a desal plant for $300 million in somebody else's water in Marina Coast, a different basin, then we get to pay 9% interest plus a little bit extra for that, as opposed to 4% interest. And I don't know what the numbers are, but I have to believe that there's a big chunk of money between 4 and 9% on that kind of coin. So I think it's in our best interest, it's in our self-preservation to make sure that with desal being so expensive, desal being orders of magnitude more expensive than water like from Marina Coast that comes out of a well, or water out of Calland that comes out of a well, we are going to pay through the nose for desalinated water, plus the energy to push it through reverse osmosis barriers. So it will cost us more than I could even, several $100s a month more for each person.
But
Plus,
we won't run out of water.
we won't run out of water, which is important. But if nobody can afford the water, what good is it to have? Because if we're paying $300 million plus the interest on the desal plant, plus the most expensive water you can produce, on top of the money people are already paying for their current water bills, who's got $800 a month for a water bill? I don't. I don't have $250 a month for a water bill. I mean, that's too much to me. I don't see how that's reasonable. How you can expect somebody who's paying $1,500 a month for a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment, 1 bedroom here, to then pay half of their rent for water, and it's not like Stockton and Sacramento use more water than Monterey. Stockton and Sacramento, in the middle of the state, further north where it's more arid, they use more water than we use, and we pay 3, 4, 5 times more than customers in those areas. So to incur more debt for more expensive water, I don't think is a great way for us to move forward. And we are not getting help from the Public Utilities Commission, which is supposed to regulate rates. So short of something dramatic, a different way to do business, we can expect financial ruin for our communities. I mean,
changed their mission.
And Calland has been aggressive in trying to buy the Seaside municipal water system. They keep approaching the city and making unsolicited offers. And part of Calland's mission statement is to acquire smaller municipal systems to grow their network of service. So if you would like to pay Calland's rates, I invite you to contact him. Yeah, I would pass as well. But I absolutely agree. We do need a new source of water that is drought-proof and sustainable for generations. Absolutely. Should we pay 9% or 4%? Should we expand the recycled water project? There are a lot of conversations being had, and there are private conversations that are part of settlement agreements that are happening with arbitrators and mediators. So there is movement on this issue, but unless we have the right people with access to these meetings and who are invited to these meetings, we may not like how they end up.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think there's also another part of the conversation about water conservation, gray water systems, collection of what do you put?
Rainwater.
Right, from the roof.
From the gutters?
I don't know the technical terms. But the communities in Europe who've done these things, who've mandated these things, save an enormous amount of water. And we could hopefully mandate it for new construction or remodels.
Yes.
And it's a little more upfront cost to put in, but the long-term savings is very great, and water usage goes down.
So on the environmental committee, one of the things we're talking about is the current zoning code for Seaside requires that a rainwater capture system, that the cistern or the bucket be supported by a concrete pad, because water weighs at 8 pounds per gallon, and 500 gallons of water will sink into the ground and then maybe flood your home or your yard. And if you are going to pour a concrete pad, that's considered an accessory structure on your parcel, and then you need to get a use permit, and it has to go before the planning commission, and you can appeal it to the city council when they don't approve it, and then you get your property value reassessed because you've added to your structure. So we have these institutional barriers to conservation and smart use of our limited resources, and so we're trying to change that in Seaside. Also, Prop 71 has to do a statewide law, removing the reassessment for valuation of your home on rainwater capture specifically. I encourage you to vote to support that. Saving water should not cost you more money by way of property value reassessments. And if you are someone who owned a home before 1978, before Prop 13, you're paying property tax that's 4 decades old. Now you're going to reassess your parcel in today's dollars so that you can save 500 gallons of water a year. That doesn't sound like something people are going to do. So we need to make it less prohibitive and less restrictive to do the right thing and save water, which we are not the first people to invent the wheel on that one. It's a very common practice all over the world. I knew someone when I studied abroad who lived in Melbourne, Australia, and it was unfathomable to her that we would live near the water and not have any. When they live in a desert, and it's just part of their culture to take 3-minute showers and capture every drop of water that falls out of the sky. So that's one of the things we're doing on the environmental committee. So as long as the state changes the law in Seaside, we're going to hopefully get rid of the use permit process and just make it ministerial, where you go to City Hall, you say, hey, I'm going to do this, and that's the end of that. You don't need permission, you don't need an inspection, you just take care of the stuff you want to do. So that's definitely one front where we can make a change, and there is already momentum in that direction. Yeah, water's the big deal, and water's the key to changing the paradigm. I mean, whether it's in Seaside, whether it's Monterey County, whether it's California, the whole world, the United Nations projects that by 2025, I think it's something like a third of the country, a third of all people on the whole planet will face some kind of water shortage and crisis. And by 2030 or 35, it will be closer to 2/3 of the entire population of our planet will face some kind of scarcity when it comes to drinkable, clean water. And isn't it absurd that in the wealthiest country in the history of the world that we would have these problems and not know how to get ourselves out of them? With all of the resources and capacity of millennia of human being-like creatures, we cannot figure out how to fix our own water system in the year 2018. That is insane to me, that we haven't yet figured that out. So having difficult conversations, forcing people to confront their biases and working toward common ground, a solution. Nothing is going to happen 100% on either pole. We have to find compromise, and if that means that a public entity starts a desal plant because we need the water, but we don't want to pay the private bond rates, that's a compromise. If we get rid of the requirement for rainwater capture, and in fact mandate it for all new construction, that's a compromise. If we install greywater systems in new buildings, like the city's talking with Marina Coast Water District about installing greywater treatment systems, individual residential ones, inside the buildings at Campus Town along Lightfighter and Giggling. So that way they don't need as much water, and then it will cost everybody less because everything that isn't solid waste will get recycled through your own building's treatment system. So your water bill goes down, but it's already low because it's Marina Coast. I mean, there is momentum. We are working towards something, but I think it's awfully suspicious that in an election year, suddenly there's talk about what we can be doing when some of the people who are already there have a long time to make a difference on this one issue, and we haven't really gotten anywhere.
Yeah, for sure.
In fact, some of the people who were there fought us on that and supported Cal-Am's lies on Measure O and helped defeat it. I'm speaking of the mayor's group, which is a despicable group as far as I'm concerned. I'll get off my pulpit now.
No, I agree that our leadership has not lived up to the expectations that we thought we could hold them to account. I would have expected far greater work to be done already on some of these issues, and it hasn't happened, and it hasn't happened for a long time. It's not like this is a 1 or 2 year old problem we found ourselves in and we're figuring out where the box is so we know what to do. This has been an intractable problem for decades, and we have made little to no progress. That does not strike me as great campaign material. I'll be quiet now, I've talked for quite a while. Please, thank you again to Elizabeth and John and Despina. I was going to say Despira, but I knew that it wasn't right. Despina, thank you so much for your hospitality and your hard work and your labor. I would ask you, if you feel energized and enthusiastic, please leave a check, even if it's for a very small amount. I will find a way to spend $5. So I would really appreciate that. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Thank you very much.
That's from Alicia. I'm getting mine now.
Thank you very much, everybody. Please make yourselves comfortable. There's still tons of food, lots of time. Relax, be joyous. Thank you very much.